Let's talk to Denis Campbell. Denis is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine. He also hosts Worldview with Denis Campbell on YouTube. Check it out at youtube.com/worldviewshow. Denis, we've been talking about for days the detention for 9 hours at Heathrow Airport of David Miranda, who is, of course, the partner of Glenn Greenwald, who is in turn the journalist responsible for revealing in the Guardian and Washington Post the leaks presented to him by Edward Snowden. So first, let's start at the beginning. What's the kind of legal justification under which Miranda was detained at Heathrow?
Well, interesting, his name is Miranda. We don't want to confuse anybody with the Miranda rights that one has in the USA. Here, Miranda was detained while he was in transit, which is kind of interesting because the Russian government, of course, said that because Edward Snowden was in transit, he was not officially on the ground in the country, they could not detain him in any way. If you look at Miranda, he did not actually enter the United Kingdom, and this is under many established treaties, but yet they decided to detain him. And we have something called the Terrorism Act of 2000. Now, I don't know that much about the act, but I know that that is the basis upon which they decided to detain and question him. And they can do this for up to 9 hours without leveling a charge. And usually that gives the people an opportunity that are on the prosecution side to determine if there's probable cause and then to, actually go through the formal charging process. It very much seems as though the use of this particular statute was a complete perversion of justice. There was absolutely no call for Miranda to be held only because he is the partner of Glenn Greenwald, who happened to be the person to whom Edward Snowden gave the infamous leaks of information and data.
We've been talking a lot about this, and I keep having a number of different thoughts about it, and I'm curious what your reaction would be to the kind of hypothetical I posed on yesterday's show, which is we all understand that American and British intelligence agencies are in a complete panic. They weren't able to get a hold of Edward Snowden. He now has a year of asylum in Russia. They are worried about what documents may still be kind of out there, but yet unreleased by media. So there's this kind of panic, and we kind of agree the detention of Miranda seemed pointless, and it also seemed arbitrary, and it seemed almost like a revenge detention. However, I want to pose an alternative, which I posed yesterday to you. Let's say that Glenn Greenwald had been in touch not with Edward Snowden, but with Osama bin Laden. And I make the comparison not because I think the two are equivalent, but simply because they are both individuals wanted by American and British authorities. In that case, let's say we didn't know where bin Laden was. We were looking for bin Laden. It was after 9/11, but before he was caught and killed. And Glenn Greenwald had interviewed bin Laden. Would it have been reasonable then? Would there be the same outrage at stopping Glenn Greenwald's partner because, hey, he might know where Osama bin Laden is? Would it be the same, or would there be a different standard applied?
Not 100% sure, David. I mean, it is a hypothetical, and I think probably what you would see happen is that people would be a lot more sympathetic to that detention in the hopes of getting more information about who was the world's greatest terrorist at the time. I think the problem we're having right now is that so many lies have been told at so many levels, and so many laws have been broken by governments at so many levels that it is now extraordinarily difficult to practice the art and science of journalism anywhere in this world. I mean, if you can be detained randomly, it's no different, in my opinion, than being stopped and frisked on a New York street because my complexion happens to be a bit darker than yours. There's a lot of things that are being used to detain reporters, to grab information from sources, to tap them in so many ways. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this conversation is appearing somewhere in Langley and then being stored somewhere, because there is that huge fear that information is going to be transmitted. Doesn't make it right. And I think that's the big issue. And what we've seen happen over the last several months is that there's been more and more attention now paid to the point where even public opinion polls are coming back saying that, no, Snowden is not a terrorist. He is indeed a whistleblower. Compare and contrast that to when he first went missing. The oh my God, my hair's on fire fear of the United States government. And people are now beginning to pay attention and having a dialogue. I liken it a lot to what's happening in the fracking debate. For the longest time, governments and oil companies had their way. Now, with what's been going on down in Balcombe here in southeast England and other places, the activists are starting to get the message out. And I think once the message and the information come out, people of conscience such as you or I, the people that watch this program, sit there and say, wait a minute, something is not right. Why the overreaction? I mean, Bradley Manning got 35 years in prison today. Whether you agree or disagree with him, that's a huge overreach for what he did if you compare back to the 1970s when Daniel Ellsberg essentially did the same thing with a smaller amount of papers.
Well, I tend to agree with you. The problem I'm having is when I say to myself, what is the standard by which we decide whether it is okay or not to stop the partner of someone because they may have information that, while we disagree that it really would be critical to the safety of the United States, from the point of view of the United States, they think that Edward Snowden is a security risk. And what I think back to, Dennis, is immediately after 9/11, Patriot Act, all sorts of laws, there was very little outrage. Some libertarians weren't happy, the occasional liberal, but by and large, we wanted to get the people who did that to the United States, and we were willing to accept much more. Now that we're further from that, it seems more distant, and the feelings have changed, but my concern is, should the process be dictated by how recent the last act that horrified us happens to be?
Well, and I would argue that the Patriot Act and several of these other, basically surrendering of liberties happened in such a way that there was absolutely no discussion, no debate, and nobody even knew what was in the Patriot Act until it was done.
But could it not be argued that it was because nobody really cared? They heard, oh, stuff to stop this from happening again? That sounds good.
Yeah, well, that's the argument. I mean, that is the standard fear-based argument. That is what people will do to keep you afraid and to keep you under their control. I mean, that's the established fact of, no matter what incident and no matter what war situation you look at. If people are sown with the idea of fear and the possibility it can happen again, they'll do anything. I mean, I've been listening to commentators on the left, and I've been absolutely astounded that they think it's okay to go after journalists or to go after people like Snowden or to go after anybody. Snowden broke the law, but he's not a traitor and he's not a hero. And I think we need to get real clear on our definitions of things. There is so much gray in this entire situation that I'm not going to sit here and judge either him or the government or anything else beyond what I've just said here, because it makes no sense to be doing, this black, white, left, right judgment all the way, like lemmings over the edge of the cliff. This is why we're seeing the government about to shut down in your country.
No question about it. And as we know, corporate media here does not really like debates in shades of gray. They don't make for good ratings. So that also is going to tend to frame things as black and white. But it's a fascinating discussion. Denis Campbell, editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine. Don't miss Worldview with Denis Campbell, youtube.com/Worldview Show. And we'll talk to Denis next week after his vacation. Denis, thanks for being on today.
Hey, and thank you, and best of luck with your move upcoming. We're going to miss talking to you from that cozy little spot there in Massachusetts.
Yep,
so
we will have more news about the move coming up soon. We'll take a break and be back after this.